The high school was alive with its usual morning energy. Students hurried down brightly lit hallways, their voices bouncing off the lockers as they chatted about assignments, upcoming exams, or weekend plans. Teachers carried stacks of papers, rushing to prepare for their classes. Among this organized chaos was a man who worked silently, blending into the background like a shadow. His name was Mr. Francis, the school janitor, a figure most overlooked, but who held the school together in ways few realized. Francis was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and hands calloused from years of hard labor. Every morning, he arrived at the school long before dawn. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the windows, Francis was already hard at work, mopping floors, scrubbing desks, and ensuring the building was spotless. By the time the students and staff arrived, the school gleamed, ready for another day. Despite his modest job, Francis carried himself with dignity. His warm smile and gentle demeanor set him apart, even if his role in the school was often underappreciated. When a student with a kind word and a helping hand. For many of the students, he was a comforting presence, a silent guardian who kept the school running smoothly. But while Francis greeted everyone with a smile, few knew the weight he carried in his heart. Francis's life outside the school walls was a stark contrast to the tidy halls he cleaned. A widower, he had lost his wife to cancer several years ago, leaving him to raise their 2 young children alone. The medical bills had drained his savings, forcing him to take on extra shifts and odd jobs just to make ends meet. His car, an old sedan on its last legs, often broke down, making his long commute even more challenging. Still, he never complained. The students, for the most part, saw Francis as just the janitor. Some even teased him, mocking his outdated uniform or the creaking sound of his mop bucket. But there was one student who noticed him, Barron Trump. The youngest son of former President Donald Trump, Barron had recently transferred to the school. Unlike many of his peers, Barron was quiet and observant, preferring to watch and listen rather than draw attention to himself. Barron first noticed Francis one chilly morning when he arrived at school early for a debate club meeting. As he walked through the nearly empty hallways, he saw Francis struggling to carry a heavy trash bag to the dumpster outside. The janitor's breath formed small clouds in the frosty air, and his worn-out shoes barely seemed to protect him from the cold. "Do you need help with that?" Barron had asked, breaking the silence. Francis, startled, turned to see the young student. "Oh, thank you, but I've got it," he replied with a polite smile. But Barron didn't leave. Instead, he walked alongside Francis, holding the door open and chatting with him as they made their way outside. That small act of kindness marked the beginning of an unlikely friendship. Over the next few weeks, Barron made it a point to greet Francis every day. He would ask about his family, his work, and even share stories about his own life. Francis was initially hesitant to open up, but Barron's genuine curiosity and kindness slowly broke down his walls. Soon, Francis found himself looking forward to their conversations. They were a bright spot in his otherwise grueling days. One afternoon, as the school emptied and the sun dipped below the horizon, Barron saw Francis sitting on a bench in the parking lot, looking worried. His car had broken down again, and he was waiting for a tow truck he couldn't afford. Barron didn't say much at the time, but he went home that evening with a plan forming in his mind. Little did Francis know, his life was about to change forever. The next morning, Barron arrived at school earlier than usual, carrying a sense of purpose. He had spent the evening discussing his idea with his parents, and while they initially raised eyebrows at the scale of his plan, they eventually gave their support. After all, the Trumps were no strangers to making grand gestures, especially when it came to helping those in need. Throughout the day, Barron discreetly observed Francis, taking note of the worn soles of his shoes and the visible exhaustion etched into his face. It wasn't just about the broken car, Barron realized. It was about everything. Francis was a man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, yet he never let it show. During lunch, Barron quietly approached a few of his classmates. At first, they were puzzled by his sudden interest in organizing a fundraiser for the janitor. "Why would you care about him?" one student asked, incredulous. But Barron, undeterred, explained that Francis was more than just a janitor. He was a part of their school community. With Barron's charisma and the influence of his family name, the students quickly got on board. Within hours, a small group had formed, brainstorming ways to help Francis. Some suggested a GoFundMe campaign, while others offered to organize a car wash or bake sale. But Barron had a more immediate idea in mind, something that would have a direct and lasting impact. That afternoon, Barron quietly excused himself from his final class and made a phone call. "Hi, this is Barron Trump," he said, introducing himself to the manager of a local car dealership. He explained the situation, describing Francis's dedication and the hardships he faced. The manager, initially skeptical, quickly warmed up to the idea when Barron mentioned that he intended to cover most of the cost himself, with contributions from his family and classmates. By the time school ended, everything was in motion. Barron had coordinated with the dealership to deliver a surprise to Francis the following day. But he didn't stop there. He also arranged for a mechanic to inspect the car and ensure it was in perfect condition before handing over the keys. The next morning, Barron arrived at school with a grin he couldn't hide. He had barely slept the night before, buzzing with anticipation. His classmates, now fully invested in the plan, had decorated the school's parking lot with balloons and banners, turning it into a small celebration. Francis, oblivious to what was happening, went about his usual routine, mopping floors and emptying trash cans. When the principal called him to the parking lot to assist with an issue, he assumed it was another minor inconvenience, perhaps a spilled drink or a student prank. But as Francis stepped outside, he froze in his tracks. The entire school seemed to be there, cheering and clapping. At the center of the crowd stood Barron, holding a set of car keys. Behind him was a gleaming SUV, complete with a bright red bow on the hood. Francis stared in disbelief, his eyes darting from the car to Barron and back again. What's going on?" he stammered, his voice barely audible over the cheers. Barron stepped forward, handing him the keys with a warm smile. "This is for you," he said simply. "You've done so much for all of us. It's time someone did something for you." Francis's hands trembled as he took the keys. Tears welled up in his eyes, and for a moment he was too overwhelmed to speak. The crowd fell silent, watching as the usually composed janitor broke down, overwhelmed by the sheer generosity of the gesture. "I don't know what to say," Francis finally managed, his voice choked with emotion. This is too much." Barron shook his head. "You deserve it," he said firmly. "You've given so much of yourself to this school, to all of us. It's the least we can do." As the crowd erupted into cheers once again, Francis approached the SUV, running his hands over the smooth surface as if to convince himself it was real. For the first time in years, he felt the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. As Francis climbed into the driver's seat, the crowd erupted in applause. Students and teachers gathered around, snapping photos and offering their congratulations. The SUV was a modest yet reliable vehicle, perfect for someone like Francis who needed practicality and durability more than anything else. Barron had even taken the time to ensure the car came with a full tank of gas and prepaid maintenance for the next 2 years. Francis sat behind the wheel, his hands gripping it as if letting go might make the moment vanish. He looked up at Barron, his voice breaking with gratitude. "I've been blessed in ways I can't even begin to describe. This is a miracle." One of the teachers stepped forward, addressing the crowd. "This isn't just about the car," she said. "It's about kindness, compassion, and recognizing the people who make our lives better every single day. Francis has been the backbone of this school, and today, thanks to Barron, he's finally getting the recognition he deserves." The principal, visibly moved, added, "This act of generosity reminds us all of the power of community. Let this moment inspire us to look out for one another and never take anyone for granted." Francis wiped his tears, still struggling to process the magnitude of what had just happened. "I came to this country with nothing," he said, addressing the crowd. "I worked hard because I wanted to provide for my family, to give them a better life. And now, You've all given me something I never thought I'd have, a sense of belonging, of being seen and appreciated. Thank you. The crowd roared in response, and Barron stepped forward to give Francis a hug. It was a rare moment of vulnerability for the usually private teenager, but it spoke volumes about his character. Later that day, as the excitement settled, Francis drove his new SUV home, the smile on his face brighter than the sun. For the first time in years, he felt hope, a genuine belief that things could get better. Barron, on the other hand, returned home to a quiet evening with his family. His parents, having heard about the day's events, couldn't hide their pride. "You made a difference today," Melania said, placing a hand on her son's shoulder. "And not just for Francis, but for everyone who witnessed what you did." Donald nodded in agreement. "It's easy to talk about helping people. It's much harder to actually do it. You showed true leadership today, Barron." Barron smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced before. He knew this wasn't just about giving someone a car. It was about showing appreciation, spreading kindness, and setting an example for others to follow. The story of Barron's gesture quickly spread beyond the school, with local news outlets picking up the story. Social media lit up with praise for the young Trump, with many commending his humility and generosity. Francis, now a local hero in his own right, found his life changing in more ways than one. His newfound confidence and the support of his community gave him the strength to pursue opportunities he'd once thought out of reach. As for Barron, he continued to focus on his studies and his role at school, quietly making plans for more acts of kindness in the future. This wasn't just a one-time event. It was the beginning of something much bigger. In the weeks following Barron's incredible act of kindness, the impact rippled far and wide. The story of Francis and his new SUV captured the hearts of people beyond their small community, becoming a viral sensation. News outlets shared the heartwarming tale, and social media platforms buzzed with hashtags celebrating compassion, such as #KindnessMatters and #BarronInspires. Francis found himself in the spotlight, something he had never sought but embraced with humility. Local businesses reached out to offer support, with a car dealership providing additional services for his new vehicle and a local charity pledging to help with his family's needs. Francis used this unexpected attention to advocate for others in similar situations, reminding everyone of the unseen struggles faced by workers like him. Barron, however, remained modest amidst the praise. He avoided interviews, letting the story speak for itself. He wanted the focus to stay on Francis and the broader message of appreciation for unsung heroes. "It's not about me," he told a friend. "It's about recognizing the people who make the world a better place, even when no one is watching." But Barron's gesture had sparked something larger. Inspired by his actions, other students and community members began organizing efforts to support people in need. Fundraisers were held to assist school staff, and donations poured in for similar initiatives. At school, Francis became a symbol of perseverance and gratitude. He often shared his journey with students, reminding them of the value of hard work and the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of their role in life. "Every person has a story," he would say, "and every act of kindness can change that story in ways you can't imagine." For Barron, the experience deepened his understanding of leadership and empathy. Encouraged by his parents, he started looking for more ways to make a difference. He quietly supported other causes, from funding scholarships for underprivileged students to volunteering at local shelters. The community, galvanized by Barron's example, became a beacon of hope and generosity. Schools across the state adopted similar initiatives to honor and support their staff, creating a ripple effect of compassion. Years later, Francis would reflect on that life-changing day, often sharing the story with his grandchildren. "It wasn't just about the car," he'd tell them. "It was about being seen, being valued, and knowing that even the smallest gestures can make the biggest difference." And Barron, now an adult, continued to carry the lessons of that moment with him. Whether in his personal or professional life, he remained committed to the values of kindness, gratitude, and humility, proving that even the smallest acts of compassion can leave a legacy that lasts a lifetime.